we have gone back to where the situation was in 2020, and we can say with that the disengagement process with China, you can say, has been completed. The understanding, to my knowledge, is that we will be able to do the patrolling which we were doing in 2020.
तालियों के साथ हम स्वागत करेंगे आदरणीय
You are watching the world 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Let's begin with the top stories we're tracking currently. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted that he had okayed the pager attacks in Lebanon, which had killed nearly 40 people and wounded 3,000. Qatar has denied on media reports claiming that it has withdrawn from mediation efforts to achieve a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, saying the efforts are stalled temporarily. Ukraine has carried out its biggest drone attack on Moscow since Putin's full-scale invasion in 2022, as the Kremlin launched its own record air attack over Ukraine. 3 airports in the Russian capital were temporarily closed and flights were diverted. Donald Trump completed a clean sweep of all 7 swing states, receiving a clear mandate amid rising speculation over who will serve in his second administration. Multiple conservative figures have flocked to the U.S. President-elect's Florida resort as far as vying for the cabinet roles is concerned, and so far the process seems more orderly than 2016 as per reports. The price of Bitcoin hit $80,000 for the first time on Sunday, fueled by the election of Donald Trump and more than a dozen new pro-cryptocurrency U.S. lawmakers. The industry poured $170 million into campaigning, and traders are riding a wave of hope that Washington will treat it differently from Wall Street, as per analysts. COP29 opens today in Azerbaijan under the shadow of a controversy involving its chief executive and the results of the U.S. election. Climate advocates worry that disagreements over who pays what, along with the incoming Trump administration in the United States, could derail negotiations. By the way, the Taliban will attend this UN climate conference for the first time since their takeover of Afghanistan in 2021. Well, our top focus at the moment, in a significant development, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he authorized a deadly attack in September on Hezbollah communications equipment in Lebanon. This actually marks the first time Israel has publicly acknowledged its role in the explosion, which struck a major blow to the Iran-backed militant group. And Hezbollah had previously accused Israel of being behind the blasts and has vowed to retaliate. But the latest is a big admission from the Israel Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Qatar has denied reports claiming it has withdrawn from mediation efforts to achieve a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, saying the efforts are stalled temporarily. But international media had earlier reported that Qatar will stop trying to mediate a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal until Hamas and Israel are willing to resume talks, and that it has told Hamas leaders they were no longer welcome in the Gulf country. Doha's foreign ministry has said they will resume those efforts with its partners when the parties show their willingness and seriousness to end the brutal war and the ongoing suffering of civilians. In fact, as you are well aware, Qatar's relations with the first Trump government had fluctuated. The big question now is, should Doha now gear up for round 2 of the same treatment? Mohammad Ghazali has been tracking the finer details very closely for us. He joins us live at the moment. Ghazali, what are the latest developments?
As you rightly mentioned, first about Qatar. Qatar, initially it was reported by the Western media that perhaps they are fed up with the kind of negotiation going on between Hamas and Israel, and how both the players are perhaps unwilling to achieve any kind of ceasefire, and hence the negotiation talks were getting stalled. But the Qatar's foreign ministry has denied these reports. They say that they are still very active in the mediation talks, but yet the two parties who are part of this entire negotiation and conflict will have to accept some kind of proposal, and they both can't have a very hard bargain over this issue. Meanwhile, all eyes are on Mr. Trump because he is yet to assume the office there. And since he had mentioned that he will try to contain this conflict, he has already spoken to Mr. Putin yesterday, as per the Western media reports. But and even Mr. Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has also said that he has also spoken to Mr. Trump, and that is when he started revealing and admitting that perhaps Israel was behind the pager attack. Now, Israel never admits immediately after launching any such attack. It only does when it is strategically suits them. Right now, Mr. Netanyahu is already under fire domestically that how the entire goals of this war has not yet been achieved. All the hostages are not released. He has already fired his defense minister twice during this entire October 7 war, which started last year. So right now, Israeli Prime Minister is under intense domestic pressure, but he sees a kind of a hope or a window in Mr. Trump that he will extend all possible help, which perhaps Netanyahu was not getting during Biden-Harris administration.
As always, Ghazali, thanks so much for taking us through the latest developments. For further clarity, we also have with us on the broadcast founder of the Middle East Insights platform, Dr. Shubhda Chaudhry. Dr. Chaudhry, Qatar has been clear that they will not accept that mediation be a reason for blackmailing it. But as things stand right now, do you see Qatar playing a pivotal role, be it alongside the United States or Egypt, for ending the war and the return of hostages?
First of all, thank you so much for calling. Yes, Qatar has actually stated that it is no longer interested in continuing with the ceasefire mediations because of the lack of support. Now, something very interesting is happening because when the Hamas officials were asked to leave Jordan in 90s, that is when they took refuge in Qatar. Now, Qatar, during the negotiation of ceasefire with Israel, there is the CIA chief, William Burns, who's involved, the military hostage chief from Israel, the domestic security chief from Israel is involved, Qatar is involved. But after the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, who is going to negotiate on the basis of Hamas? At the same time, for Qatar, the recent development is that the Sudanese ambassador, who is positioned in Doha, has actually welcomed the proposition of Hamas officials setting up their office at the northeastern base of Sudan, which is just next to the Red Sea, a choke point. So that would now further create difficulty, because if Hamas goes to, say, for example, they tried 17 Arab countries and they were not allowed to have offices recently. So if it goes to countries like, say, Sudan, or it goes to, say, Iran, or it goes to even Algeria, I'm just predicting what their course of action might be. It might be even difficult for US to partner or to create any kind of ceasefire negotiations or have communications. Secondly, Qatar played a very pivotal role when it was important to give humanitarian assistance, electricity, food, at the behest and approval of both US and Israel to the victims in Gaza. Not right now, but over a period of time.
Right.
Now that channel will be closed.
Well,
and it is going to have a negative ramification on the US and Israeli diplomacy. Even the civil society members of Israel, actually, they are quite flabbergasted because they looked up to Qatar at a certain way of a negotiator. They don't know what Egypt might do in a certain case because Egypt was at a backbench. What other Gulf countries, if involved, will do, or what many other negotiators will do. There was a certain kind of status quo which was established by Qatar over the period of time.
Meanwhile, Dr. Chaudhry, the world is also watching for signs of how the US election result might affect the war against Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, while Mr. Netanyahu may have said he's looking to build on his previous relationship with Trump, are there any guarantees Trump will give the Israeli Prime Minister all that he wants? What role do you actually see the United States playing going forward, especially under Trump's leadership?
So there are two very important, as you know and everyone knows, that US presidential elections are very expensive. and they need massive amount of funding. So there are two donors who are very interesting profiles in Trump's presidency campaign. One is Miriam Anderson, who was born in Israel, is a very famous microbiologist and the survivor of Holocaust members in her family. She is the richest woman in US, almost 36 billion US dollars. She gave around 100 million to Trump campaign. The second very important thing which the media often misses is that Trump has actually a Lebanese son-in-law, Michael Boudos. His father, Massad Boudos, is actually a very prominent Lebanese American who, because right now the caretaker government in Lebanon is very, fragile, there might be some kind of governmental change.
Right.
All of these are going to play a pivotal role. Trump himself has said that he's not going to allow Nikki Haley or Mike Pompeo into his cabinet. The first 100 days of his presidency are going to be very, very pivotal on what he does.
In fact, that
As
is
he has
something that
said,
many analysts
yeah.
have also said. I'm sincerely apologizing, Dr. Chaudhary. I'm running short of time at the moment, but thank you so much for laying insights on the most crucial aspects of where we are going to head from now on. Meanwhile, Amsterdam has banned demonstrations for 3 days after overnight attacks on the Israeli soccer supporters. In fact, the Dutch city also gave police emergency stop and search powers in response to the unrest that was seen over the weekend. Dutch police said that 5 people required hospital treatment and that 62 arrests had been made. But Benjamin Netanyahu ordered 2 planes to be sent to the Netherlands to bring back fans. Let's turn our attention to Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, a massive drone strike rattled Moscow and its suburbs overnight into Sunday, injuring a woman and temporarily halting traffic at some of Russia's busiest airports, while a huge nighttime wave of Russian drones targeted Ukraine. A top UK defense official, meanwhile, said that Russian forces had suffered their worst month of casualties in October since their full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. But as Ghazali was reporting briefly, Donald Trump has spoken on the phone with Vladimir Putin. This was on Thursday and discussed the war in Ukraine. This is what the Washington Post was reporting, citing people who were aware of the conversation.
In a dramatic escalation of the conflict, Russia and Ukraine have unleashed their largest drone attacks since the start of the war in 2022. Moscow launched a staggering 145 drones in a single night, a record for the entire conflict. Meanwhile, Ukraine fired an unprecedented barrage of drones towards Russia's capital, turning the skies over Moscow into a battleground overnight. Ukraine attacked Moscow with at least 34 drones. Russia claims its air defenses intercepted and shot down all the drones over the region. However, debris from the downed drones caused a fire in 2 residential buildings, leaving a woman with burns to her face, neck, and hands. The drone exchange came as Putin officially approved a strategic partnership treaty with North Korea, a pact which includes a mutual defense clause that obligates both nations to provide military assistance to each other in the event of an armed attack. The treaty underscores the deepening ties between Moscow and Pyongyang, particularly in the context of the war. It also comes as the Pentagon confirmed North Korea sent approximately 10,000 troops to Russia to train and fight against Ukraine last month. U.S. President Joe Biden slammed the deployment of North Korean troops as very dangerous. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the first battles with North Korean soldiers open a new page of instability in the world. Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump has outlined a peace plan to halt the ongoing war. According to sources, Trump's plan proposes establishing an 800-mile buffer zone policed by both European and British troops to separate Russian and Ukrainian forces. The plan also includes a 20-year delay on Ukraine's NATO ambitions, with the U.S. pledging to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities. As tensions rise and the war continues to escalate drastically, the prospects for peace remain uncertain. The deployment of North Korean troops and the potential for increased military cooperation between Russia and North Korea signal a new chapter in global geopolitical dynamics. Amid these developments, Trump's proposed peace plan adds another layer of uncertainty, one that could have far-reaching consequences for the stability of the region and beyond. Samia Afsar for NDTV World.
Let's bring you the latest from the United States now, where in a decisive win, President-elect Trump has claimed victory in all 7 key swing states closely watched in the 2024 election. Now, with this sweep, Trump secures 312 electoral votes, putting him on track to become the first Republican in 2 decades to win the popular vote. His win highlights his stronghold on the Republican Party, with his MAGA movement now poised to become a lasting force, as many analysts have highlighted, especially if the Grand Old Party also takes control of both chambers of Congress. But Arizona, the final state to be called, was declared for Trump late on Saturday after he had already clinched enough electoral college votes to secure the presidency. Well, for further clarity, we have with us David K. Johnston at the moment. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnston, for making time for us. The intrigue really is around the fact that even solidly blue states saw a rightward shift this year as Democrats across the U.S. lost ground among key demographics, which includes Black and Latino men, young people and independents. Sir, what particular reasons could this be attributed to?
Well, Donald Trump, who is a master con artist and has been one his whole life, has done an incredibly successful job of persuading people that any news account that criticizes him is a lie, that he is the source of truth. And once you get people to come to that point of view, then facts, verifiable, independent facts don't matter. And we saw this in this election. Donald won quite handily, much better than the polls suggested he would do. He made some significant inroads with young men. And I think there'll be a lot of political science research. And this is part of a global trend. Of 17 countries, democratic countries that have held elections recently, 15 of them, any center or left government was voted out. Only in Spain and one other country did liberal governments keep their hold on power. So I think this is part of a very broad trend around the globe towards authoritarianism and away from the liberties of the people.
Well, it's not a very delightful time for incumbents, but there is frustration as well, because we are hearing and picking up on protests across New York and Seattle and some parts of the US as people on both sides are taking to the streets in frustration about his re-election. But sir, the bottom line is the politics of the most powerful country in the world, as many call it, have lured sharply to the right, led by a rejuvenated MAGA movement that has defied all odds by expanding the voting coalition. What do you think are the immediate challenges for Trump and his team? He has made some sweeping promises for day one in office.
Well, Trump has made a number of promises that are inherently contradictory.
Yes.
He promises he's going to make workers better off, but he's going to put a 60% tariff on imported goods, or as much as 60%. A tariff is essentially a tax on consumers. And because domestic manufacturers can raise their price to almost the level of the tariffed price, that means it's a system to redistribute money from working people to business owners. He says he's going to cut spending, he's going to expand spending in a number of areas and cut taxes, yet pay off the debt. Well, that triangle just does not compute. 2 + 2 still equals 4. He has stopped talking very much about building a wall, which he said he would do in his first administration, and he didn't. And the little short section of wall they did build, immediately people on the other side of the border went to stores, bought chainsaws, and cut right through it within a matter of seconds. So I think there's a great many contradictions, we'll see what happens to the economy very quickly.
Mr. Johnson, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the latest. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates. Meanwhile, the price of Bitcoin hit $80,000 for the first time on Sunday, fueled by the election of Donald Trump and more than a dozen new pro-cryptocurrency US lawmakers. But the industry, by the way, poured $170 million into campaigning, and traders are riding a wave of hope that Washington will treat it differently for Wall Street, as analysts hope, with less regulatory oversight. Stocks also surged post-election, but now comes the hard part for investors as they try to predict which industries will see a lasting boost. Financial stocks are seen as a strong bet given the likelihood of milder banking rules in the US, while some warn oil and gas stocks could take a hit if Republican efforts to cut regulations create a supply glut. Well, news and updates continue in a moment right after this very short break. Don't go anywhere.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
India's IT capital is always buzz. It's literally a city that never sleeps. And I keep you ahead on all the Bengaluru buzz.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
NDTV proudly upholds its legacy of trust and credibility. According to the prestigious Reuters Institute's Digital News Report 2024, NDTV is the top-most news platform in the country. Number one in both online and offline reach in India. Beating all its competition, NDTV stands for trust.
I now request the Honorable Prime Minister to launch NDTV World and address the summit.
It was the grand launch of NDTV World by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. NDTV World, as he laid out his vision for the India century at the NDTV World Summit.
ऐसी सदी जिसमें भारत के प्रयासों से दुनिया में स्थिरता आए.
In the presence of those who are shaping our future.
मेरी तरफ से आपको ढेर सारी शुभकामनाएं हैं.
NDTV World, your new home for global news is here.
NDTV proudly presents NDTV World Summit 2024, the India Century. I now request the Honorable Prime Minister to launch NDTV World and address the summit.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's inaugural session at the NDTV Summit outlined his vision for the India century, driven by aspirational India.
हमारा प्रयास होगा भारत की सेंचुरी सिर्फ भारत की नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता की जीत की सेंचुरी बने.
The summit brought together prominent global leaders, highlighting India's pivotal role on the world stage.
Not just Indians trusting India's leadership, but the global South especially trusting India's leadership.
Permanent seat on the UN Security Council is something that should be India's right.
Canada is concerned, I think
Welcome back. Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister, Denis Manturov, is set to arrive in India for a two-day visit, which will include a key bilateral meeting with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. He will also take part in the plenary session of the Russian-Indian Business Forum in Mumbai today and will head to Delhi the day after. Let's get you the latest from Bangladesh now, where the interim government has said it will seek Interpol's assistance in repatriating deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina from India and other fugitives to face trial for alleged crimes against humanity. Ms. Hasina and her party leaders, as you are well aware, face accusations of ordering brutal suppression of the anti-discrimination students' movement, resulting in numerous casualties during the July-August protests, which led to her fleeing the country. Well, let's turn our attention to the other crucial story we're tracking from Spain, where violent protests have erupted across the country as thousands took to the street in Spain's eastern city of Valencia to protest the authorities' handling of one of Europe's deadliest natural disasters in decades and also call for accountability. Questions are being asked in Spain about the authorities' handling of the crisis, one that has brought out the very worst and the very best in people. Take a look at this report.
Violent protests erupted across Spain as demonstrators clashed with police. Their anger fueled by what they see as the government's inadequate response to last month's devastating flash floods. The clashes erupted after a peaceful march earlier in the day, where tens of thousands rallied, demanding the resignation of the regional president responsible for the emergency response to the floods. As the situation intensified, riot police used batons to disperse the crowd, striking demonstrators during the confrontations. At least one protester was detained. Regional leader Carlos Mason is facing intense pressure after his administration failed to send flood alerts to citizens' cell phones until hours after the flooding had already began. Mason has defended his handling of the crisis, saying that its magnitude was unforeseeable and that his administration didn't receive sufficient warnings from central authorities, despite Spain's weather agency issuing a red alert hours before the flood struck. The historic flood caused at least 220 deaths, 211 of them in the Valencia region alone. Over 36,000 have been rescued, yet 93 people have officially been declared missing. Authorities admit that the real number could be much higher. Thousands have lost their homes and streets remain covered in mud and debris. The full extent of the damage remains unknown, but repairs have been estimated to cost billions of dollars. Samia Afsar for NDTV World.
Meanwhile, Afghanistan's Taliban will attend the COP29 climate summit for the first time since their takeover in 2021, the country's environment agency has confirmed. But COP29 opens today in Azerbaijan under the shadow of a controversy involving its chief executive and the results of the US election. Climate advocates are actually worried that disagreements over who pays what, along with the incoming Trump administration in the United States, could seriously derail negotiations. Well, thank you so much for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest updates for you as always. Do stay tuned.
Hello, Moto.
Motorola Edge 50 Pro. World's first AI-powered pro-grade camera.
Stay informed and entertained with the new and updated NDTV News app. You can watch all our channels live, listen to podcasts